So let's go over the top here and create functions for our random number card generator. The only reason to do this is because if we want to pick 5 cards, then we would want to create a function for that so we don't have to just copy and paste the code 5 times, which would be the other way to do it. So really what you would do is you would do what you've done so far but put it into a function. But let me take it just to its logical extreme, if you want to think about that, and create a function for each piece of it just so you can see how this would work. So the first thing is that maybe I'd make a function for a hand of cards. And so I create a function, and that function basically needs to have, I'm going to make it so there's 5 cards in the hand, right? Like you could theoretically choose how many you want. In fact, let's do that. Let's just say, hey, let's make it a random number. I mean, not a random number, but a number that the user can choose. And so we'll say here, number. We'll just put in, no, maybe I can't use the word number. So let's just use n. So we're going to then say, okay, well, we want to do what we're going to do n number of times. And that's why we need to use that. And what are we going to do? Well, we are going to print we're going to print a card. And so now we have a function called card, and that's going to actually generate the card. And we just have to do it n number of times, which means down here, if we say hand of cards 5, it's going to go send a 5 up there and going to do 5 cards. So now we're going to say, okay, well, what do we need in order to create a card? And so a card, of course, is made up of 2 parts, right? It's got its suit and its value, just like before. So, okay, our card needs a suit. So let's make a function called getSuit that actually is the one that figures that out. And again, you wouldn't have to, you could do this many different ways. It doesn't have to be this extreme, but I'm just kind of showing you how you could use all sorts of functions to do each piece of this one piece at a time. And it helps you kind of see abstractly how functions can be useful. Okay, and then now that we have a suit and a value, maybe we would make a full thing called like card text is going to equal the suit plus the word of, oh wait, the value should go first, right? So the value plus the word of plus the suit. And in fact, we should probably put ovens with spaces so that it puts spaces in our thing. And then we just have to return the card text, and it will go right here, and this will print it out. So far we have a function that just says, well, I want X number of cards or N number of cards, so go get them. And this says, okay, here's how we create a card. Now, of course, we need 2 more functions, one to actually create the suit, and one to create the value. Oops, get value. The neat thing about this, it might seem like a pain, but you're really breaking the program down into just tiny little steps. And this is what coders do more often than create a big long program. I mean, the programs become big and long, but each piece of the program is kind of broken down into steps. And so you can use functions for that kind of thing. So the getSuit, this is where we would create a random number, and you would take what you did before to create cards to do this, and maybe you made it so it did the Unicode for the card, maybe you didn't. But in the end, you're going to have to return something. So after you create the suit and stuff like that, you're going to want to return it. So I'm going to say return suit. And then, just for argument's sake, so it doesn't have an error, I'm just going to set that equal to 1 for now. That's just so I can run this program without an error. So we'll even put this, we'll just say sample result. In fact, let's just say spades so it's easier. And then for the value, you would create your 13 values based on what you've done before. And at the end, maybe you'd say that the value equals, and so again, this will just be an example. And we're going to return the value. The returns are important because here we said something equals the suit. So it's like, well, what's going to equal the suit? The thing that gets returned from the get suit function. And what's going to equal the value? The return here, the value that gets returned is going to get put into this. Remember, this doesn't have to match this, just in my case it happens to, but they don't have to be the same names because functions create their own variables and have their own global or their own scope of variables. And then here it returns the card text. Well, nothing in hand of cards said equals, but we did want to print something. So if we want to print the result of a function, we have to return something. So each of these functions returns something. This function doesn't return something because this isn't expecting anything. This is just saying go off and run. So there's no return there. So now when I run it, it tells me that the card is not defined because I can't just, because here I called it cards and here I said card. Alright, so we just have to change that. I wonder who saw that. There we go. So we've got 5 ace of spades. Or I could say, hey, I want a hand of 8. And so it immediately creates 8 ace of spades. And if this was random, we could get different results. Now the other interesting thing to think about is what could you add to this so that you wouldn't get the same result for each card. Like if it found the same one, it would rerun itself and get a new one so it doesn't reuse the same cards. And then after that, you'd have to think about like, oh, actually, we want to like take a card out of another spot. Like the deck would have a deck of cards, and you would want to just take one out of that deck so that you could never use it again, and you could make everybody, 4 players have different hands of cards. So cards can kind of keep going and going in their complexity. Besides just creating one, which is kind of fun, and you have to do all that in order to, if you actually wanted to make a game of cards. So some things to think about, but hopefully this gave you some insights on how to use functions a little bit more because they can be confusing.